This episode of Minor Obsession is brought to you by the UNC Charlotte Belk College of Business, North Carolina's urban research business school. As alumni of Belk College ourselves, we encourage you to visit belkcollege.uncc.edu and learn how Charlotte's business school can inspire your career path. All right, everybody, welcome to another edition of Minor Obsession. Scott Lieberman with Sean Newton, and this is our year-end spectacular. It's the end of a decade, Sean. So what better way to end the decade than to count down, in our professional opinions, our top 5 moments of the decade for UNC Charlotte athletics. Sound good?
It does. I like the way you started, too. You had like a used car salesman meets Pat Sajak voice, like, Vanna, show us what's behind door number 1. Yeah, I love it. I think that's a great way to wrap up a decade. We've got a solid 10 years of Charlotte 49ers sports to talk about. We each have our own independent top 5s to dive through. I'm excited to see what you picked. But first, it was really tough for me to come up with just 5 accomplishments over the past 10 years. So I have an honorable mention. I don't know if you have an honorable mention for yourself, but one that didn't quite crack the list but was a pretty special one to me.
This better not be on my list.
Well, I can't
if it
tell
is,
you.
I'll tell you to stop.
I can't. What? You can't tell me to stop. That's my honorable mention. I have better ones that I think meant more to the program. So what's your honorable mention before we dive into the top 5?
So my honorable mention's more generic.
Generic,
because we had a few big wins. So to be completely honest with you, basketball did not crack the top 5 for me at all.
Yeah.
I had Oklahoma State, November 10th, 2018. We've heard that as a big game for a lot of former athletes. When the game, the buzzer beater by John Davis was a big one, 66-64. But I feel like we've had a lot of big basketball wins, quotation marks, against teams that are ranked, upsets, etc. So I just kind of generalized that as basketball in general. That was the one that's most meaningful to me at the moment.
Basketball as a whole is your honorable mention?
Yes.
Hey, guys, nice trying on the decade. See you in 2020.
I mean, when's the last time we made an NCAA tournament?
Yeah, well, it definitely wasn't in this decade.
Yeah.
We almost have to go back another decade to get there. But so just basketball as a whole, you're like, yeah, okay. I'll honorable mention you into my top 5.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So mine, it may be on your top 5. To me, it was just on the cusp. I wish maybe we were doing a top 10, but to me, the game, our first ever football game, a lot of people would say that belongs in the top 5, but I think my other 5 are a little bit more meaningful as a whole. Victory over Campbell, 52-7.
Yeah, don't talk about it too much. It made my list.
Well, I don't care. That's not my fault. Mark Hogan, interception on the first play from scrimmage. It was good. It was special. But I had 5 other ones that I wanted to include there.
That's fair. Only other honorable mention I'd like to drop in there is the creation of Minor Obsession. What a great podcast. And
that was in this decade, too.
And I'd like to thank both of us for moving forward with that and why we have a platform to talk about this. Over a year running and hopefully more years to come in the next decade.
So let me kick off the top 5 then, because your honorable mention is a nice segue into my 5th spot. I did think men's basketball at least deserved a spot in our decade. They, for so many years, have been our primary and only revenue sport and given us a lot of exciting things to cheer for along the way. Coming in at number 5, February 16th, 2013, men's basketball goes into Butler, facing a number 10 ranked team in the country, and knocks them off 71-67. And that was on the eventual road to our only real exciting season of men's basketball. Finished with a 21-12 record, made it to the NIT tournament, losing to Providence 66-75, and also made a little noise in the A-10 tournament before losing to number 16 ranked at the time, St. Louis. So men's basketball, I thought, deserved a top 5 spot there for a pretty good season, and really the best season we've had to cheer for since Bobby Lutz left.
Yeah, so that was probably the top Allen Major
Yep,
season. I
that
think
was
that
the
was like
top Allen
season
Major
2,
season.
season 3.
But to Allen's credit, and you mentioned it in your honorable mention, he somehow always found a way to get the guys up and beat a top 25 team. We had that stretch of 5 or 6 years in a row of
Well, it
one
was a
top 25
continuation
years.
from Lutz
It
too,
was, yeah, but he
because
continued
we
it.
also got to play top 25 teams because the A10
Yeah,
was a better conference.
that's right. Well,
So great segue, and your honorable mention actually segues well to mine because my number 5 was the first ever football game ever, Charlotte versus Campbell, the 52-7 Mark Hogan interception. It's got to be there. We've been clamoring for football forever. Got to go to the stadium, had our first tailgate, not under the lights because we didn't have lights at the time. It was hot. It was packed. Our only sold out game ever, probably.
no, we've had other sold out games. Get out of here. Don't disrespect us like
I'm
that.
just saying it was something special that I feel like everyone was waiting for. Students, people that people that graduated like us pretty recently after that or before that, and then your alumni that were here for the 1977 Final Four and now are seeing football 40 years later. So I just thought that had to make the list. That's a pretty big moment of the decade, a pretty big moment of our program to have our first ever football game, especially where we are today. So that was my number 5. Transitioning, I feel like we can go back and forth like this. You want me to do number 4 and
Sure.
then throw it to you?
Sure.
Number 4 for me was kind of early in the decade. It was my super senior year, so I was still in school for this. December 11th, 2011, men's soccer gets into the NCAA Finals championship against Chapel Hill. Unfortunately, loses 0-1. But that was a pretty awesome moment. We were on, I think it was on ESPN. It was in Alabama. I remember they had the bus rides for the students. Kind of a heartbreaker. I still think the refs kind of gypped us out of what potentially could have been our first national championship. So I put that as number 4 on my list. Men's soccer, very good squad, ranked 14th in the country, losing a heartbreaker to win the national championship against Chapel Hill.
Okay. My number 4, March 26th, 2011, women's basketball knocks off Virginia 79-74 to go to the women's NIT semifinal, which is the Final Four. They call it the semifinal, but it's the NIT Final Four. They eventually lost to Toledo 60-83 in the Final Four, but really good season for the women. Impressive to be able to make that deep of a run in the NIT tournament, which was special there. It was a changing of the guard, too. That was Karen Aston's last year before we had Coach Consuegra come in, which has been a great ride since then with quite a few NIT appearances along the way. But if we're going through the whole decade, then including the run there where we made it all the way to the final. That was a 27-10 season for us. Had some good preseason play in the preseason NIT tournament as well. And special time where we made it deep into the A10 championship and then made it deep into the NIT. So I thought that was a real good season for us and a capper to start the decade there. Moving on to number 3 for me, sticking later in the season and a different special time that you brought up, but a different time in my heart was April 28th, 2011, groundbreaking ceremony to build Jerry Richardson Stadium. Wasn't our on-the-field product. It wasn't seeing us play against Campbell, but it was really special to be there, see a lot of ceremonial groundbreaking, pickaxes out there, which have their own special place in my heart, and just general excitement to see a lot of people who had been pushing for football for years across, groups and alumni bases who really wanted to see something like this see it all come to fruition and see the start and the groundwork be laid to bring years of future excitement. And now, that was 2011, so now we're almost a decade in from that groundbreaking, and what a special ride we've had along the way.
For sure. So for me, going to my number 3, and the rest of my stuff's more of the second half of the decade, this is also an event. April 28th, 2017, Larry Ogunjobi gets drafted by the Browns, 65th
Ooh.
overall.
I like
The
that one.
first draft pick in 49er history, the first overall third-round pick, 65, significant. That's the number he wears on the field now. So, got to go with Larry Ogunjobi, really solidifying that, holy crap, we have a real program now. We're not, D1 double A. We have real people coming out of there, and hopefully Alex Highsmith continues that tradition that's been going on for a minute now. But I thought that was a really significant one for the program. Moving on to my number 2, this just happened. Charlotte versus Buffalo. 31-9, not quite the outcome we hoped for, but we were in a freaking bowl game. We talk about becoming a real program. First, you have a game. That's why it was number 5 for me. Then you got someone drafted. That was number 3 for me. Now you're in a bowl game. That's number 2 for me. Big moment of the decade. Really got a lot of buzz around the program. Saw it on the news. Had people coming up to me, asking me about the bowl game, talking about Coach Healy, talking about the team. It's the most buzz we've probably had in the decade, was making that bowl game. Again, not the outcome we wanted, but seeing the fans unified in the Bahamas. I unfortunately wasn't there. I know you were there, but just experiencing that via social media, via watching the game on ESPN, being a part of the season, going to the games, I thought that was number 2 for me. Great moment for the program.
Yeah, I'd have to echo that. And, my number 2 is very close to identical. So I'm sensing a theme here for you. You're a glass half empty kind of guy. A couple of yours are picking the game that we lose as your high point. I on my list have the games that we won to get us to those games to lose. So my number 2 is November 23rd, 2019. Charlotte football beats Marshall to become bowl eligible for the first time in program history. 24-13 victory, pouring down rain, fans in the stands choosing to show up and come out even though it's pouring down rain. The excitement on the team's face, the crowd of people rushing this field after the game as soon as the final seconds count down. It led to that Buffalo game, but to me, the Buffalo game was exciting in its own right. It was a bowl game. It was really special to make it there. But, it was a loss in the books and a learning experience for us. The Marshall game is what made it there. And Marshall at the time was the leader in the conference coming in. We knew we needed a victory to at least be 6-6. The football team rallied, beat the number 1 team in the conference, kept them out of being in the conference championship game. FAU made it instead, and I just felt like that was a huge step forward for our program and showed that we can play with the big dogs in the conference, battle back, and like Coach Healy said along the way, we've set a couple records this year that nobody can ever beat. Nobody can beat going undefeated in November like we did because we rolled off 5 games in a row to close it out. So really, really special part in my mind. And that brings me to number 1, another
Drum roll, please.
another glass half empty on your side, glass half full on my side. So December 9th, 2011, you mentioned it as your number 5. I thought that was a little disrespectful.
I made
to
number
put
4.
So far down
It was
the
number
list.
4, not number 5. Just
Men's soccer?
yes.
What was your number 5 then?
Your honorable mention of the first game against Campbell.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, still, 4 is pretty deep for the best postseason presence we've ever had. You took losing to Chapel Hill as your memorable moment. My memorable moment is December 9th, 2011. Men's soccer beats Creighton. Not just beats them, but beats them in penalty kicks. Game ends tied after regulation and OT. Go to penalty kicks. Ice in our veins. Tyler Gibson, Isaac Cagrin, Donnie Smith, Isaac Cowles go perfect on penalty kicks. 4-0 for our side. And then we've got Clay Davis in the goal. Only allows 1 goal to go. We end up winning 4-1 on penalty kicks to send us to that Chapel Hill game. Much more exciting moment. Really loved it. Set the stage for being able to close out that exciting year with the tough loss to Chapel Hill that we obviously watched and were upset over officiating that may have been or may not have been. But that for me is tops of the list. I can't think of a time that I've been more excited or more proud of our program in this decade as the 49ers as a whole, and really felt like that belonged at number 1 in my books.
So my number 1's a little bit different. Again, it's kind of an event. We'll see, what our fan base thinks about this, and we can definitely pull this on Twitter afterwards. My number 1's February 28th, 2018. It's also my 29th birthday, but it was a great day. And that's the day Mike Hill was named our athletic director. And we're just about 2 years into that, and we've seen a lot of change for the good. We've seen football make it to a bowl game. We've seen Coach Sanchez come in, and the basketball team is looking pretty promising. We've seen a lot of new coaches across baseball, softball, tennis, etc. I see a lot to come, and I think the next decade is really going to have Mike Hill's handprints all over it. And I think that's a very important day that we're going to look back on and be thankful for. That's why, the first half of the decade might have been a little slow, but why we're kind of turning really strong right now. And I think a lot of that has to do with Mike Hill, and that's why it's my number one. The hiring of Mike Hill, and hopefully the retaining of Mike Hill and a lot of these coaches in the next decade.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. That's a really good pick. I think that I agree with you. The excitement right now stems all from him and the direction he sets at the top. He's like a CEO of the athletic department, right? The CEO kind of sets the stage. They might not be in the weeds doing the work. Those are all the coaches and players putting in the hard work, but he's setting the direction and setting that foundation to give them the culture to live upon. And like you said, we had some exciting stuff at the very beginning of the decade to talk about. And then obviously women's basketball has been good throughout the decade, but outside of that, there's been some stuff towards the end of the decade, some stuff at the beginning of the decade, and then, a little in between in the middle of the decade there. And so I think our list looks drastically different if we're talking about the closeout of 2029 and doing a top 10 over the next 10 years.
Absolutely. So let us know what you think. Were we off? Were we on? Who's more right on this?
Is there anything we forgot about?
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough. You boil down 10 years into 5 moments. There's got to be a few exciting things we forgot about along the way.
Well, it's kind of cool that we still ended up not having the same list. And like you said, good kind of visual for me is I look at the negative, but I also feel like you learn the most from the negative. And those moments stick with me a little bit harder than the big wins. Those tough losses are there. So I remember those moments, not bad or good. I wish we would have won those games, but we were in those games, which is exciting. So great talk with you on this. Follow us on social media. Email us, minorobsession49@gmail.com. We'll probably put a poll out with a couple of our tops and see what people really think were the top moments of the decade. Thanks to everyone for listening. And, we'll be engaging on social media. We got some cool interviews coming up as well. Next week, we're going to have Coach Kara Consuegra. And then the week after, we're going to have Coach Ron Sanchez. So got your basketball fix for the new decade. So be on the lookout for those episodes. Of course, every Tuesday morning. We'll be right there in your iTunes. Sean, anything else from you?
No, it's been a fun 10 years. Hopefully the next 10 years are equally as exciting with more to cheer about.
Well, remember as always for this decade and the next decade to wear green
and go Niners.